Hi. Welcome to episode 133 billion of the Omnia Performance podcast. I guess before we get started, the usual kind of housekeeping requests. I'm giggling as I'm looking at Tom because Tom's established he's not been in a podcast studio before, so he feels like he's in a really strange, alien, false environment. So I'm going to try and make him feel as uncomfortable as I can throughout this. But as I say, the usual housekeeping stuff, Tom's probably looking at me wondering what I'm banging on about, is if you can subscribe, you can rate, review, share this with your friends, do all the kind of things that bring enough attention to this podcast to at least not get us shut down for being incredibly dull, then that would be wonderful. So do that and leave some comments and let us know how you feel about us, and more specifically how you feel about Tom. Tom, as I say, it's the first time in this particular studio, first time doing a podcast with me in front of me now. I'll be kicking him under the table just to make it more difficult. But for anybody who doesn't know, Tom McClure is, how long now, Tom? We've had you here for, as part of Omnia, as a full-time lead nutritionist for Omnia since, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, April the 8th, is that correct?
That's correct.
But you have actually been the lead nutritionist by proxy, essentially, for Omnia for the best part of, I'm going to say the best part of 3 years now. Is that about right, or have I overplayed that now?
I think you're about right, yeah.
Yeah, we had a third-party arrangement with a nutritionist, with a nutrition outfit, which you were the lead man for us, and we've absorbed you, much to our enjoyment and pleasure. And you're here today. We're going to discuss the top from your nutritional bias and from your experience. It's worth noting for anybody listening in that your experience as a hybrid athlete is huge. We can touch on a little bit of that from an experiential perspective as we go through. But from your nutritional bias, from your experience as a nutritionist, as a professional in that field, the top 3 mistakes that hybrid athletes make. And hopefully we can also apply some solution to that as well. Rather than saying these are the things you do wrong and then we'll shut the shop up and go home, we want to say what we think is the best fit for that. So you can speak experientially, or you can speak from your vast knowledge of dealing with all these kind of athletes that you've done across the spectrum. And let's go at them one at a time then. Let's go your top 3. Pick one. Top 3 hybrid athlete mistakes nutritionally. Go, Tom.
Thanks, Jonny. Yes, we're going to start with the big one, which is energy availability. This, for me, has been the often most challenging area when working with athletes and also looking at my own training and nutrition in terms of making sure that overall, across the week, across the month and months, you are eating enough to support performance, often balancing multidisciplinary goals without impacting recovery, without potentially gaining weight or losing weight. It's finding that sweet spot, because comparing when I previously might have worked with someone who went to the gym and did 5-6 kind of 1 hour training sessions per week, a hybrid athlete, someone who's balancing different goals, can have a very varied week. And day by day, week by week, month by month, you need to be aware that your energy demands can differ massively across 2 days, 7 days. So it's making sure that you have a real bird's eye view of your nutrition and make sure that effectively you are fueling for the work that is required. So if you've got a gym session one day, but then you're on the track the next day you're in the pool for an hour, and then you've got bike intervals in the evening, and then on Saturday you're going for a 5-hour ruck, the energy demands are quite vast and quite varied. And often, whether it's the background that the athlete has come from in terms of their own training background, their own knowledge, or just maybe what they think they should be doing, sometimes there's a bit of mismanagement in terms of how many calories they need per day, per week, per month in order to support their goals, whatever they might be.
Yeah. Do you find then that athletes come to you, is it a kind of a indicative of kind of current habits? So you're describing somebody, like you say, 5 to 6 workouts in a week. I'm guessing usually the same as we find from a programmer's perspective, they've maybe come from a single sport background, or there may be the simple but noble goal of fitness and aesthetics, but now they've decided, listen, I'm going to chase a performance goal. And are you finding that overall it's a volume problem, as in we've established they're not getting enough energy, they're not taking in enough nutrients, enough overall food, essentially, to cover off those needs. Is that just simply not having a kind of that bigger picture approach, and therefore you think it's a little bit of education, or is it based on maybe other biases? What are you finding triggers that particular mistake?
I would say there are two areas. You're correct. I think in one aspect is you might get someone maybe from a bit more of a traditional bodybuilding, even kind of functional fitness background, where their weeks are relatively similar week on week, and then suddenly their training volume is ramping up. They're doing extra training, extra sessions. Maybe they're training for a running event, a triathlon, and suddenly they're doing all these extra hours of cardio. And obviously there's an imbalance that's created somewhere, and they're inadvertently placing themselves into a calorie deficit. The other side of it is I still come across people who just are afraid to eat enough.
Yeah.
And this is, a conversation that I've had with many athletes across all disciplines, whether it's someone who's a serious amateur, let's call them, to all the way up to professional athletes.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are afraid to eat enough because they think, well, if I eat more, I'm going to gain weight. Mm. Whereas often when I can work with them and guide them in the right direction, if you eat more, sometimes it's just like putting another log on the fire. That fire will just burn brighter.
Yeah.
You will often gain a better adaptation from that session, whether it's sets and reps in the gym, whether you want to run faster on the track, whether you want to be able to perform at the desired prescription of that zone 2 run by having the right amount of fuel at the right time in the tank so that your body performs more effectively. That in turn is going to bleed into better recovery, better energy, away from training as well. So I think there's two camps for that, definitely.
Yeah, as you say, the recovery is a key element. You don't want to be waking up feeling like you've covered all the bases, and naturally you wake up in negative equity, and you're never going to make it back, because it can be. I guess this leads into my next question again from your experience is, what's the trigger for people figuring this out? I mean, what we generally want to do, I think you and I will agree, is to kind of have these conversations before it becomes a problem. Say to people, this is how we see the bigger picture. This is how we see the application of these particular protocols. But are you finding that athletes come to you confused as to why they aren't recovering, or confused as to why they're not adapting, or what's the trigger point for an athlete to come to you and then you to discover, oh, okay, I see that this recurring problem has happened with you also?
Either they've plateaued for some reason. Often we see a lot of people make newbie gains in any discipline, that they come to, athletes step foot in the gym, they put muscle mass on, they get stronger. You've seen that, athletes start doing a bit of endurance training, triathlon training, etc. But at some point, what you were doing with the original nutrition plan might not match up to where you are now. Mm-hmm. And my goal is to kind of bridge the gap and actually look at, well, what you're currently doing is different to what you might have been doing six months ago. Just looking at it again from that kind of bird's eye view. I know I mentioned that already, but just, having a look at those potential other kind of KPIs that I'll ask them in terms of how's your energy away from training? Because often we all feel good when we're in the gym or we're out running because we've got that, endorphin kick, etc. But actually, how are you concentration wise at work? How are you as a parent? What's your muscle soreness like? What's your gut health like? There's lots of factors that I will get from having conversations with athletes in terms of working out, actually, are you just running a bit on empty? Are you struggling? Are you not progressing? Are you not enjoying what you're doing? That can often be a sign of under eating, and red S is something that's become a lot more, to the forefront of people's minds, which is great, which is something I'm very passionate about, is making sure that, being lighter to be a better endurance athlete isn't always necessarily the best result for people.
You've hit a trigger point there for me.
Sometimes it's about making sure that you want to be able to perform well and recover effectively and be able to do it again. Be able to do this type of training.
Mate, that's the key thing we actually say, isn't it? Is again, from a program, these things bleed into each other very much. Hence, you being part of the team are part of a bigger. And again, everybody knows I hate this word, but a holistic picture is that this idea that one bleeds into the other, and you can't function. The reason I kind of got animated there was I was going to ask you. You said at the beginning of this. Particularly, the point one of mistakes that hybrid athletes make is that you had personal experience with this, and what you did was you triggered my personal experience there as well, which is this staying lighter thing. I think for me, for a long time, we've kind of covered off a lot of the injuries I've had in many podcasts and things, and I don't wear it as a badge of pride. I certainly look on it as the opportunity to offer cautionary tales. But what I was doing was I was concerned. This came from kind of combat sports, in actual fact. This is my weight category. But I was trying to apply some logic. We're going back 10 or so years now, but trying to apply some logic to ultra endurance and considering the idea that the more weight that I carry, the more weight I have to carry. The lighter I am, the more energy efficient I'll be. I kind of decided, not arbitrarily, I could go into detail, but won't for the sake of this podcast, but I decided on a particular bite point for my weight, any higher than that. And I was now looking at a kind of negative return. And I forced myself to stay at that particular kind of point, approximately 70 kilos, which is light, not mad light for me. I fought at 65, so that felt like it was, that's quite a heavy weight, But that was that refusal to move from that meant that, the longer distances I did, the more challenging the races I was doing, therefore the more challenging the training was, the more I was getting injured. And so I was getting injured in races and then getting injured in training. During a 5-mile run once, I broke my leg, and it was months and months later that I'm like, I know why this is happening, because I'm tracking back, really trying to open up the box here and go, what have I done wrong? Why is it, because we're joking from a coaching perspective, my coaches and myself at the time, you obviously just made a chocolate, mate, all this kind of joke stuff, but let's try and break it down and find it. And I had to track back and find that and realize, actually, I'm just simply not feeding the training. I was surviving through it and I felt relatively good, oddly. Not good, but things were breaking down, and then again, I could track back, well, actually my skin didn't look great. My recovery wasn't good. I was just grizzing through this stuff, and slowly you unpeel and you're like, fucking hell, I've been ruining myself for the best part of a year in a false hope that this, or in a false illusion that this weight mark that I'd set myself was of any value. And you said it yourself a minute ago, which what triggered me was, in actual fact, adding a few extra kilos, not many at the time, but adding a few extra kilos. This log on the fire analogy that you gave, suddenly I was firing all cylinders and I was setting PBs in training and felt good, felt motivated, all that kind of stuff came back. And it was simply that switch over from being in a deficit, which I hadn't realized.
Yeah.
Logically, I should have done, but I hadn't, switching over into maintenance and a sometimes surplus. That's my experience, and I kind of fixed that, and your perspective on that was really brought me to that again. What was your experience?
I was doing a lot of kind of functional fitness, CrossFit, etc. And for some reason thought to get better at that, I needed to be a certain weight and always had to be a certain body fat percentage, and was then just getting crushed in training all the time. Yeah. It was kind of probably not eating correctly around my training and was just therefore fell out of love with it a little bit.
Yeah. I did the same. Yeah. Started to hate it all.
Yeah. Then obviously the world fell off the cliff back in 2020. I'd always been a half decent runner. I always liked to go out for a run. It's something I did a bit more when I was younger. And then it was a case of, well, if I can't, snatch and do pull-ups, I've got to find different ways to train. So it was, a couple of dumbbells, I'm going to run, I'm going to get fit again, I'm going to go back to kind of just doing the basics really well, try and put a bit of muscle mass on. And, over that kind of couple of years in lockdown, kind of in and out, etc., I started to do half marathon, ran my first ever kind of self-supported marathon, but felt along the way, and we were having a conversation about this earlier, is that for me, I like to be told what to do, and I like to remove the decision stress sometimes. That's actually when I reached out to yourself personally. I was like, look, I want to do this goal of running the furthest distance I've ever ran. I want to be able to run 60 miles, but actually I want to get stronger as well. Yeah. And I've seen this chap on YouTube who seems to do a bit of both, and he talks about you. And so that's how kind of that's how our paths crossed. That's how our paths crossed. And I've never looked back, if I'm honest. I think, I'm heavier, I'm fitter, faster, I'm stronger. Bearing in mind I'm getting closer to 40, I'll take all that.
No problem with that.
I'll take all that as positives. Yeah. But also the flip side is I've got more energy day to day. I feel I'm better to my wife, I'm better to my friends, I'm better cognitively. So yes, we can look at this as a big picture in terms of nutrition and training, but actually, nutrition has a huge carryover in terms of let's say, how you are the other 23 hours of the day.
Yeah.
You know, how well you sleep, how good you are cognitively, how great you are at your job. And that's often my role as a practitioner, is they come to me, athletes often come to me with a performance related goal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's great, but actually how can I also impact and improve the other 23 hours of their day?
Yeah. Which in itself lends itself to that performance, clearly.
Exactly. Of course it does. You know, we work with a lot of high performers, don't we? Whether they're athletes or business people or both. And I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at what good people or successful people do well from a professional point of view. So I'll always look at, you know, when I've spent time working with professional athletes, etc., and the things that they do really, really well. It's not a hidden secret what they do. They just do it with ruthless consistency.
We say that so much. This is the impact that Fergus has had as an athlete, in my opinion. Not the impact, sorry, the key ingredient. You know, people will look in, not just on Fergus, on loads and loads of people, maybe even myself back in the day, but they look in and say, how is it that this individual must have a secret ingredient? There must be something special about them. Remember the Iron Cowboy being accused of having sort of different myostatin, bioengineered this, all, you know, no, just an average person, but what they're doing is ruthless consistency, as you say. That's interesting. So to that point, and that is part of the answer, I think, I won't put words in your mouth, but if that is the mistake, if overall energy intake is a key mistake that hybrid athletes are making, what's your fix for that? I was about to say, I stumbled across quick fix. We don't really have a quick fix, but what would be your kind of, okay, let's start here solution?
Look at what you're currently doing. So a lot of us are very good at the data of our training, the data of our sleep and our metrics through our smart tech, but often there's maybe a little bit of resistance around tracking food. Now, I'm not saying you have to track food long term, but keeping an honest food diary. I often make the joke
let's say honest again. We had this conversation before as well. It's got to be honest.
I often make the joke about strapping a GoPro to athletes' heads, because that would give me a real honest picture, because athletes are very good at often under-reporting.
Yeah. We used to, sorry mate, cutting you off.
Right.
I like the GoPro idea, because we used to, one trick I did when, as a nutritionist myself, was to have them take a picture of every meal they had. Before you eat it, take a picture. Before you eat it, take a picture. And that in of itself, without even tracking, was like, oh God.
If any of the
then they go, well, I better not take a picture of the Mars bar. And even in thinking that, they're like, fuck, the Mars bar maybe.
If any of,
as an example.
No, you're spot on. If any of the athletes that I've worked with or working with listen to me, they'll know I love a visual food diary.
Yeah.
Because it works on a number of ways.
It's very easy to reflect on as well. Sometimes tracking, you kind of hinted at it a moment ago, can be overwhelming to people. Like, I don't want to track everything. I don't want to have to do maths every time I have a meal. Okay, just take a photo.
Take a photo, write it down.
Let's interact with that together.
You know, we're all very good at, say, logging training. We're probably good at logging our sleep scores, looking at our recovery metrics. Have a look at, if you can do 10 days, I think that's great, because that often takes into account 2 weekends as well, which can be where a lot of people trip up. They might be really good Monday to Thursday, Friday to Sunday. Maybe they undereat because they've over-exercised, or vice versa. Yeah.
Or the usual British thing. You know, I've
down the pub,
7
6 Guinnesses later, whatever, yeah.
The only way out of that's a big breakfast. Well, you've just smashed 4,000 calories, mate.
So, but being aware of what you're currently doing, even before you worry about getting calorie calculators, tracking anything, just look at what you currently do, which will bleed into the next 2 points that we're going to talk about. But from that, you should be able then to put things side by side. And I then, as a practitioner, can often look at people and be like, right, if you're not progressing, let's look at, are you under? Are you over? Is there a skewed distribution somewhere? Like, say, are you great Monday to Thursday and you've got difficulties Friday to Sunday? Are you good Monday to Wednesday because you're all prepped and organised and you're on it? And then things fall off a little bit at the back end of the week. So I really like kind of 10, if you can do 14 days, great, but 10 days will often give you a really good picture. Let's say it can be pictures, it can be a MyFitnessPal or a tracking app if you want to, or just write it down and compare that with your training and compare how you feel. You know, what days do you feel good? Yeah. What days do you struggle in the gym? What days are you really sore, beaten up? What days are you struggling at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at work because you're fatigued and exhausted, and then you'll get a bit of a
slumps
picture.
are, marks where the peaks are.
And then from that you'll be able to then maybe identify an area or two that you can work on. But I think until you've done a little bit of that groundwork, often it's then very hard to know where to start.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll often, with athletes, I'll often get them to traffic light. So it might be we've got one red area here. Friday night's your weak point. We need to make sure we've got a good intervention. We've got a few ambers in the week. Watch out for this, watch out for that. And then we've got some green areas. These are good. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that gives you a nice bit of framework. You can self-regulate that and then have another go, do another 2 weeks, see how you go and go from there.
And as an interesting aside, which we won't label, when you hit these red marks, my heart goes out to people who then think he's going to take away my pints. It doesn't have to. What we then can do is look across the week and look at the framework and say, okay, you can still go for a pint. For God's sake, we don't want to take away your time with your mates and all the rest of it. But let's look at adjusting this way and that way and all the rest of it. Yeah. So there's always little kind of manipulations. So I guess the short. Let's cover off bullet point 1, which is mistake number 1 hybrid athletes make, in your opinion and in mine, in fact, is just understanding overall energy expenditure. And we think the answer to that is an open and honest appraisal of what it is that you're actually taking in versus what you're putting out. And we can offer a few formats to do that. Ultimately, one way or another, whether it's tracking or whether it's a picture diary or whether it's journaling, it's essentially journaling in one way or another. And we do find that from that can come some very quick conclusions. And the journaling itself creates a habit of understanding habits, which is a great start. Excellent. So number 2 then, again, in your opinion, with your nutritional bias, second mistake that hybrid athletes will make.
So second mistake is not understanding or not getting correct your nutrient timing, your workout nutrition. So we've looked at like the big rock of how much you eat per day, per week, per month. Yeah. We're now kind of breaking that rock down and looking at.
So we're going to assume this athlete now has covered off that first. We now know what we need in order to meet that that energy demand. But now we're still making mistakes. So mistake number 2, after to clarify.
That's
just
all right.
To set the scene for you again.
Yeah. So mistake number 2 is then looking at how and where you distribute that across the day. Okay. What I see people still commonly get wrong is not eating the right amount around their training.
Okay.
Particularly if,
so feeding that output.
Particularly if people train often in the first part of the day.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether it's habitual, whether it's just natural, people like to backload calories for the evening. Their dinner, their evening snacks tend to be a bit of a skewed distribution in terms of energy intake. Whereas if you're looking at it purely from a basis of where your body needs its highest amount of carbohydrates, where it needs its highest amount of energy potentially in the day, is around your workouts.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are we seeing that manifest then? I know that to be, again, from experience, I think that's from personal experience, I've made those mistakes as well. But certainly that's something we come up against with athletes, and I know that's something you come up against. How is that manifesting? So are we just seeing, my guess is you're going to nod or respond affirmatively to this, are we just seeing kind of workouts then attended to in a suboptimal manner for the most part?
I think maybe people don't realize how good they can feel going into a workout.
Yeah.
Whether it's just habit of naturally underfueling, maybe they've got their numbers, maybe they know the calories and macros they should be hitting per day, and they just see it as a numbers game. Whereas actually, if you look at where you place those calories, can have a really positive impact in that you're going to walk into that session feeling well fueled. Therefore, the positive outcome can be, like I've spoken about, better adaptation, more sets, more reps. I often get so much feedback then on less muscle soreness, which is a big one for people. Feeling less sore means that you can potentially then train to a higher intensity for more days in a row, more days in the week.
Well, we quite often get the question, I've got exceedingly bad DOMs after this one particular session every week. And logic would tell you if they're continuing, if it's a repeating program, operating under the SAID principle, we're looking at this, you've done this now for 8 weeks. It's not a novel stimulus. Why is that happening? And actually, when you track back and you look at it, it's a Monday morning session. Monday mornings, they're gathering all the crap up. They're rushing out a little bit quick. They get to the session and they're not fueled for that one session. So they go into the session underfueled. As you say, that they're clearly not adapting over time particularly well to it, and they come out of it really, really sore. But the habit, the exercise selection or the workout itself is getting the blame. In actual fact, just being prepared for it. in that nutritional, in that sort of energy dense manner is really where the problem lies.
And a lot of athletes that might do maybe 2 sessions in a day, nutrient timing becomes even more important because your post-workout nutrition is potentially forming part of your pre-workout nutrition for later in the day.
Yeah.
And that second session might be a low energy requirement session. It might be more of an adaptive session. But if that session is a performance session, I know I've done many Mondays on an Omnia Performance plan where I'm squatting heavy in the morning and then I'm at the track in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That afternoon session is tough.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I can turn up, hit the reps, perform well, and still have good energy after the session. Again, it's a common thing that I hear is that people train and then they feel wiped out for the rest of the day.
Yeah, they're done. Yeah.
Because what they've not done is got themselves back to, I always talk about, getting yourself back to baseline as quickly as you possibly can. And this again comes back around to carbohydrate periodization. Again, I like a traffic light system in terms of knowing where sometimes you can have a lower carbohydrate intake around training, like a red session. Then we might use like an amber kind of description. It might be a weight training session. It might be a 40-minute aerobic session. And then there's going to be sessions in the week that might be 2 hours of training back to back, or it might be threshold session on a Wednesday, or it's going to be big pre-fatigue Friday. You need to be walking in.
You sound like a man who's been through a lot.
I've been through a fair few pre-fatigue Fridays, that's for sure. I've got the scars from all those goblet squats on my forearms. Yeah,
some shakes coming on there.
But you've got to be walking in. Why would you not? This is a conversation I like to challenge. I say to clients, I'm not picking holes, but I like to challenge you. Why would you not want to walk in feeling 100%?
Yeah.
Why would you not want to walk in feeling absolutely amped up, not relying on caffeine for energy, not relying on stimulants, use food for energy? Walk in, you're going to have a much better session. You're going to feel great. You're going to feel less sore, and you're going to have much more energy for the rest of your day, those other 23 hours that I've spoken about, by making sure you really bookend that training by looking at what you're doing pre-workout, potentially what you might have to do during if it's a longer session, and then look at what you're doing post-workout. So, if we're zooming out, are you eating enough day by day, week by week, month by month? Then the second step is look at what you're doing around your training. Yeah. If you're plateauing, if you're feeling sore, if you're missing reps, if you're not quite feeling 100%,
it's not there. Yeah.
You're not feeling sharp. There's so many demands you might be putting your body through as a hybrid athlete. There's a huge kind of, vitamin and mineral turnover, huge kind of demands musculoskeletally as well. And the cognitive side of things. The best chance you can give yourself is to make sure that you are going into that session well fueled and you are recovering effectively afterwards.
Yeah. It's the old car analogy, isn't it? You wouldn't set out on your journey and think, I hope there's a garage on the way. You kind of think, I'll fill the car up before I go, and I'll figure out where the stop-offs are in between. So to give us a practical example, and not to give you the horrors and the shakes again, let's go through very briefly and at a relatively high level, so we're not getting too deep into the weeds. Let's go through one of these Monday sessions that you described. Very often in our kind of training style, we like to go through, once people are kind of, deep enough into the programming. This isn't day one for people, but there will be something like maybe a heavy lower body session, and then maybe later that day, the expectation or the hope is that somebody can attend to something like a sprint session. So both sessions are really quite intense and quite demanding. And I'm going to make this up for the sake of it, and we'll consider all of other variables to be pretty static. Your first session is at 7 a.m. That's the timeline you've got because of your job and your other commitments. And we're going to say that's an hour-long session, lifting heavy, lower body. Your second session, you can only get to somewhere between 3 and 5 o'clock. So those are your relatively straightforward. When that second session is going to be heavy interval sprints. Let's just, for the sake of making this easy, say 10 times 30-second repeats with however much rest you need, but they're going to be hard. How are you going to fuel for those over the course of the day? So what are you suggesting people do going into that first session, coming out of that session, and then preparing for the second session, and then coming out of that second session? That's a lot to cover, but I think we can probably just bounce through that.
Yeah, great. So let's look at session one. I think if you can, you should fuel. You can train fasted Personally, I'm not a fan of it.
No.
If there's an opportunity to get something in pre-training, do so. Could be a sports drink, could be a banana, a bit of dried fruit. Hasn't got to be a lot. But if you've got the time, you might want to have a smaller meal, larger snack. 0.5 to 1 gram of carbohydrate per kilogram body weight would be ideal. So for me, that's like 40 to 80 grams of carbs. Have that maybe an hour or 2 hours before training. If it's a weight training session, a little bit of protein in there would be ideal as well. So that, I'm going into that session well fueled. Post-training, get a meal in within an hour. But that meal needs to be high carbohydrate, because not only am I recovering from that session, but I need to be thinking about what's coming later in the day.
And you've also got the day to
got a full day in the office.
Yeah, exactly.
To-do list from Jonny and Fergus to crack on with. Yeah, I know the drill. So again, we're making sure pre and post workout is dialed in and really tight. Somewhere in between that, you're going to have a lunch. And then I want people to work back from the second session.
Yes.
So if it's 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, you have quite a range. Work back from, and effectively, probably what you did pre-session 1 can probably work quite well pre-session 2. Some fast digesting carbohydrate, maybe an hour, 90 minutes before you train. Not so much protein if it's a bit of a track session. If you just want carbs only, it can be whole food. You can use a bit of sports nutrition. Obviously, always a little bit of trial and error. But again, making sure at that second session, it's a performance session. You need to be turning up, tank fueled, ready to go. It's not a zone 2 easy run. There's less energy requirement for that kind of session. This is a high performance session. It's a green session. I would be thinking in my mind, this is a high carb session I'm going into. And then the same post workout. I need to replenish with carbohydrates. I need to repair with protein. Want to revitalize with a bit of kind of fruit and veg, etc. in that evening meal. So in that day, you've got 3 core meals. You've got a bit of pre-workout nutrition before each session as well. And then depending on personal preferences, what you've got around you, you might have a mid-morning or another mid-afternoon snack. And that should kind of set you up for that day of performing well. But hopefully, like we've spoken about, being able to get up the next day and do it again.
Ready to go again. Yeah. Ready for Tuesday, which is just as bad. So, okay, to summarize there, I won't try and summarize all the carbohydrate recommendations and things. People can track back and listen to that again. But to summarize there, the second mistake you see specifically hybrid athletes making is really fueling the work itself, fueling the workouts themselves. And you've just described really quite eloquently, essentially ramping in to the workout, understand that you need to work into that, reverse engineering as much as you can, depending on that time of day, and making sure you immediately refill the tank on that front. With enough of a timeline into a second session, refill the tank again, make sure that that's nice and full for that second session, and then afterwards, again, replenish the tank. So always keep the bloody tank full.
Yeah, get back to baseline as quickly as you can. Yeah.
And I believe I know what our third point here is going to be, and I think this kind of nicely segues in actual fact. Take us through what you think the third, hopefully that's covered off the second point, but let's go through the third key nutritional mistake that we are seeing hybrid athletes make then.
I'm going to talk about food quality.
Yeah, I did think it was going to segue in.
I'm going to be the boring nutritionist. It could be my new Instagram handle, but because I'm not radical, I'm the boring nutritionist. But
we don't want radical, we want results, Tom. So that's good.
Well, if you think about the first point we covered off was the total amount of calories you should be eating day by day, week by week, month by month. The second point is then where we distribute those calories on each day, fueling for the work required, high, medium, low carbohydrate demand are based upon what you've done or what you're going to be doing. The third point is then, yes, we can look at all the numbers, etc., but food quality is so important. And it's often something that's overlooked because people have become aware of calories and macros, which I'm all for, no problem at all. But I'm not a fan of if it fits your macros. No. Just scanning barcodes and tracking food and potentially missing out on vitamins and minerals that are potentially relatively easy to get into your diet, but there might be things that people are just looking past. Food quality is very, very important, I think, from a recovery point of view. Again, from an energy availability point of view, in terms of that nutrient density, what that food will provide you. And also, food quality for me is an enjoyable part of nutrition.
Yeah.
Whether it's, your own kind of social background, whether it's what you do to kind of celebrate, unwind. It's there's lots of cultural aspects that come with food, and food quality for me plays an important role in that. And my often role as a practitioner is still try and make this journey enjoyable for people. I don't want to suck the life and suck the fun out of things. You spoke about 6 pint of Guinness and things like that. But for me, it's still finding a way that we can make you perform well, a healthy body as a high performing body, but also hopefully kind of take you on a journey that maybe exposes you to new foods to try, different recipes, different ideas that can, help you become a high performing human being. So yeah, food quality, I think, is often so massively overlooked. And when you look at it again from a bird's eye view, people are probably doing okay, but I think there's always an opportunity. I like that word. There's always an opportunity to add a little bit more of something in. There might be something that someone might be a bit mineral deficient on. So how can we, again, just keep adding in another log on the fire, make things burn a bit brighter, which is a part of coaching and part of working one-to-one with someone that I always really, really enjoy, is trying to add rather than take away.
Yeah, which comes back to the Guinness, although we don't want to add too many Guinness. But the key ways to go about this, in my opinion, you tell me if my thoughts are antiquated or not, because you're the man on the ground now. The simplest way to do that, in my mind, initially anyway, before you start really looking deeper into these things, is colour on your plate. You'd agree with that?
Massively, yeah.
It's very simple. You can look at a bad diet, Scotland in particular. God bless. I can say this as a Scotsman, and everything on your plate, if you're eating badly, let's say, is beige. You've got chips, you've got pies, you've got this thing, that thing, and it's all beige, and there's no colour because there's no vegetables and there's no sort of natural vibrancy to that plate. I think that's a really easy place to start. Now there's lots of better ways and much more intelligent way. But if you're looking at your plate and you're not seeing a lot of colour, let's get some colour on that plate, and it's real simple.
100%. I always like to try and meet the athlete where they're at. I'm never going to strip all their go-to meals out and add a load of new recipes in. I'll be like, okay, this meal you have at lunch is great. Let's try and add in, like say, more colour, more variety. For most of us, the freezer section, I think, is fantastic for this in most supermarkets. You can buy mixed frozen bags of most fruit and veg.
Everything, yeah.
You can buy mixed berries, you can buy mixed peppers, you can buy mixed Mediterranean veg. It's so cost effective. Nothing's going to go to waste, and it's very easy to probably add something to an existing meal. If you're cooking anything on a hob, stir fry, slow cooker, you can probably throw some more veg in it.
Yeah.
If you're having a smoothie, porridge, yogurt, you can probably add, berries to it. And again, it's probably looking at what you're currently doing and maybe identifying the meal that's not so colourful, and that's where I would start. So, if we're looking for how do I practically apply this, is look at that meal that is a bit beige. Maybe it's a bit chip heavy, a bit wrap heavy. Yeah. How do I just add some salad to this meal?
Yeah.
How
simple. Yeah.
The type of training that a lot of the athletes go through, again, places a lot of demand on the body. So if we're thinking, if someone's going to ask, well, why do I need to focus on my food quality? Again, for me, it's about your recovery rate. I want to put someone in the best possible position to perform well, run fast, lift heavy, whatever their goals are. And the feedback I often get in terms of, it can be instant. It can be the next day. People will message and go, my energy feels really good today. Or I feel less bloated. Or I feel a bit less sore already this week. And that's often with nutrition and even with training, it can be a long time sometimes until you get some really good feedback or progress, or feel like you're really kind of taking strides in the right direction. Whereas a quick fix, like looking at the amount of colour on your plate, looking at the amount of protein that's in your meals, even looking at, I don't want to go down the kind of rabbit hole of ultra processed foods, but even looking at just by cooking more of the meals yourself, or using a food prep company to make your lunch every day, or to send you lunch every day rather than getting something from the shop, I guarantee you're probably going to feel better quite quickly.
Well, it's an interesting thing you bring up there. Feel better. Feel better is huge, because we're talking about performance, we're talking about recovery, and overall ways to gauge that. We've got all kinds of metrics to gauge that kind of stuff. But recovery itself, You're going to slowly be able to gauge that through bad performance metrics. Oh, I haven't recovered enough. I can tell that because my training metrics are not now matching up with my hopes. But in the middle of that somewhere, what's lost is people's kind of slower, more cerebral, perhaps, interaction with themselves. And this is, how do I feel? And I think that, I can't remember who it was. So if anybody wants to give me the information here, who I'm supposed to be crediting, but many years back now, just as If It Fits Your Macros became a big thing, what was it, IIFYM, whoever this was had, I can't do this in my head now, but it was If It Makes You Feel Good. Now what that ended up being misconstrued as, well, fucking ice cream makes me feel good. So Guinness makes me feel good or whatever. And the point actually was slightly more subtle than that. It was like, listen, if you have a big, and I'm picking on things arbitrarily really, but if you have a great big pizza, my wife's a good example of this. If we have a Domino's pizza or something, there are plenty of other pizzas out there, but if she's to have something like that, within an hour or two, her system just feels like it shuts down a little bit. There's too much salt or something in it, we've decided. But ultimately, there's this initial sort of palate rush. This is, oh God, this feels good. You get that kind of super hit that you get from eating Mars bars or whatever, this hyper palatability that such a thing comes with. And then there's this immediate downturn where you kind of think, oh, I don't really feel good. I feel a bit, you mentioned bloated, don't sleep well, feel very dehydrated. And is the payoff good enough for that kind of moment of on the lips? Is a lifetime, it's a lifetime of misery. And the answer is no. So she has decided this does not actually make me feel good. Momentarily it does, but overall it doesn't. And the net outcome is feeling bad. That's where the scale is heavier on that side. So I'll just no longer have pizza. And it's not like she's not going to ever have a pizza again. It's just she knows that she can pick and choose when she's kind of willing to make that overall sacrifice. And there's loads of foods I can pick on in my own life, in my own habits. And I think that's nice now. That's a nice now moment. It's like that whole adage of we're always willing to swap what we want for what we want now, and that's a problem because then we lose the sight of the bigger goal. Food kind of sits in that category as well, doesn't it? You can go, oh, this tastes nice. Oh, that tastes nice. But what's the overall feeling? And I guess what I'm trying to drive home, and I'm sure you'll agree, is this kind of segues really quite nicely back to where we started. In actual fact, the example that we gave as a fix for the first mistake was to kind of have an honest appraisal of what it is that you're eating, have that honest appraisal of what's going on your plate, and then back to point 3 is like, let's have an honest appraisal about the colours on that plate. Do I have enough veg there? Do I have any veg there? Am I eating enough fresh seasonal produce? Am I even thinking about that kind of stuff? I don't have to think about it all the time, but I can start to think a little bit more freely about it. And does this actually make me feel good? Which can lend itself back to performance. Is this actually making me perform well? Do I go into this feeling sluggish? I've got the right amount of carbohydrates in, I've got the right amount of protein in, but I still feel a little bit like I'm sort of treading through molasses here. Why is that? Maybe those foods just don't agree with you. Maybe it was a bolus dose that hit too quick and now you're having digested. But think about these things, I rambled a little bit there, but I'm sure they agree that they're reasonably sensible points.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to the key, which was point number 3. And we'll kind of summarize there and wrap up, I think, Tom. We've got our third issue, our third mistake that you often see hybrid athletes making, is just overall food quality is not really being thought through. And the fix for that, you summarize for us.
Again, look at what you're currently doing. I think that's where that food journaling, food diary will give you a bit of instant feedback into where nutrient density is just a bit lacking, whether it's a time issue, whether it's a fatigue issue, whether it's a logistic issue, you struggle to eat well in the office environment or something. You can then see an opportunity of where can I make 1 or 2 more meals per week a little bit more nutrient dense? Where can I improve the quality of some of my protein sources? Where can I just try and increase the variety of nutrient density? And remember your why. You're trying to balance multiple disciplines. The potential for injury risk is higher. The potential for kind of nutrient deficiency it can be higher. So rather than looking at spending a lot of money on a supplement or spending a lot of money on technology to improve recovery, one of the simplest and easiest things you can do is just improve the quality of what you eat. Take control of that. And I can't get the point across enough. The feedback that we get when people just take control of their food a little bit more, cook a little bit more, prepare food, or like I said, outsource it, use a food prep company, find better options near your workplace, but just be a little bit more organized. The results can be instant, and that will have such a knock-on effect in terms of your performance in and out of the gym, and hopefully move you closer to where you want to be.
Yeah, the results can be instant and transformative. It can be such a huge impact that these really quite simple tips that we're trying to offer here can be game changing. And I think that's probably a good point to wrap it up. But ultimately, I think in my head, I'm trying to kind of look at all these three issues and kind of summarize. And I think really said it a few times in different ways. An honest appraisal is a really good way to go about this. If you find that hard to kind of figure out how do I make that honest appraisal, we've had a few ideas here. Without making this a kind of a salesy moment, I think that it's right to say you're passionate about this enough to be in a place where if people want to reach out to you and say, listen, I get the concepts. How do I apply this in a me sense? Because we're trying to be generic here to cover off everything. I'm different. I've explained my wife's different. You're different. But we're all trying to kind of cover off the same things. As this is your first in-person appearance on this podcast, where can people get a hold of you, Tom?
Go to the Omnia Performance website. You can book a consultation with me directly. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about working one-to-one together, like you said there, Jonny, the strategy and implementation is often the hardest area. People might know what to do or how to do, but doing it consistently can be challenging, particularly if you've got an event or a big, hairy, scary goal that you're working after. And then also come find me on Instagram. Go to the Omnia Performance Instagram, and you'll find some posts that have been collab with me. I often jump on and do some Q&As, and also just pop me a question in my DM and I'll happily answer it.
What's your direct Instagram handle?
At tmc.nutrition.
Brilliant. One thing I'd say outside of the scope of this particular podcast is if people want to go and see a particularly good hybrid athlete, regardless of nutrition, or possibly because of the extraordinary results of good application of these kind of ideas, go and look at Tom's Instagram. Tom has done some extraordinary things that I've had the privilege to be along for the ride with, but certainly not riding in your coattails. You're an athlete and a half, mate. So I think if people want to have a look and just see somebody to inspire them, have a jump onto Tom's Instagram. I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you very much. I hope we haven't broken you with this first run of podcasts, because we're going to smash you with a few more, I think, once we've got a hold of you. But thanks for that today, mate. And as ever, if anybody's listening in and wants to know more, jump in the comments and jump onto Omnia Performance and have a look at Tom's profile, and see you there.